We're going to first go to our first speaker, who is Sall Grover. So Sall is the Australian founder and CEO of Giggle, a female-only social networking app. In 2021, Sall received an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint from Roxanne Tickle, alleging gender identity discrimination for not allowing him, a male who claims to be female, on the platform. The AHRC complaint led to a Tickle versus Giggle, most ridiculously named Australian federal court case of all time. However, the ridiculousness is matched by seriousness, as, while the complaint is gender identity discrimination, Sall removed Tickle from the app on the basis of his biological sex. Apart from telling us about this case, you've also just been at the first Do No Harm conference in London. And can you tell us about that? And then move on to the case.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I was just really lucky when I was contacting everyone saying I was coming over. Sex Matters invited me to go to the conference today. And I didn't realize it was going to be so awesome. It was amazing. So I arrived and there were protesters outside and they had like a megaphone and they were just talking. But I walked in fine. And then once I was upstairs, everyone was saying no one else can get in. They've stopped it from getting in. They've let off a smoke bomb. Like, craziness has happened. And it was only after I left that I watched the videos of what it was like. It was crazy. But actually inside the event was marvelous. It very much had like, the adults in the room feeling. It was just everyone going like, this, obviously this has to stop. How are we going to get it to stop?
There was quite a lot of medical experts. Mm-hmm. And did you feel that the mood has really shifted then, that we're getting a critical mass of medical experts on side?
I think so. I mean, I think there's still fear, but just more and more every day, I suppose. I don't know if we'd be at critical mass yet in the medical part. I don't know that world well enough. But no, it was quite positive in the sense of like, it's one of the really great parts of it. They were saying, sort of stop this, that, there's this certainty, with the gender ideology, like, these kids, they go, or adults, that they go to the doctors, this utter certainty and it's affirmed, whereas it's evidence-based that needs to happen. And obviously there's no evidence for any of this. So no, it was just, just the stuff of like, yeah, I mean, it is completely normal for a certain section of young kids to have basically personalities and tastes that are just different from what is the norm of average for their sex, and most of them grow up gay. That's the evidence that they do have. And when I was listening to it all, I was just thinking, I've got a 20-month-old daughter, and she can play with any toy that she wants, and I dress her in quite neutral colors. I don't like the florally, frilly things. My mom does, so you can always tell when my mom has dressed my daughter compared to when I have. But what Belle naturally, like, she can play with whatever she wants, but she does naturally gravitate to like her doll. And I'm finding it interesting to observe that, because it's not like I have another baby or something like that she's trying to emulate. She just has this little bubba and she pushes her around in her little stroller and she loves it.
I used to dress my my eldest daughter in lots of boys' clothes, because we had lots of nephews and got loads of hand-me-downs that were male. And when she got consciousness, when we went to playgroup and she realized that she was girl and that I was dressing her in boys' things, she just turned up one morning, like at breakfast, and addressed herself. And I sort of went, why have you dressed yourself? Like, why have you? And she said, well, I'm not, I want to wear this. And she picked out all these little dresses. Like, I was like, no. But of course, it's freedom. And she wanted to fit in, and she knew that she was a girl. So she felt like, why not do the girl thing? And I mean, now she's very neutral, but I thought it was really amusing that for all my best efforts of not making her hyper feminine.
Yeah, I know. I do wonder if I'm
most feminine stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm going to end up with this girl that loves like florals and frills, which I really don't like. But yeah, whatever. I mean, it's literally her choice. I buy a lot of her clothes in the boys department, actually, because I actually think the clothes are cuter. Like the little toddlers, they just, the girls' clothes do have, those horrible slogans, like, like, be nice. I'm not dressing my daughter in a shirt that says that. She's under no obligations to be nice to anyone.
Let's carry on then. So you're going to tell us a bit about or a lot about Tickle versus Giggle, the case of gender identity versus sex. So I'm going to go off screen again and over to you on that.
Okay. So basically, like as the introduction said, so it was actually January 2022, I got an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint for gender identity discrimination. How it works basically is you can settle a dispute in the Australian Human Rights Commission before it escalates to go to court. But to settle this, they were saying that I would have to let Tickle on the platform, let all men who claim to be women on there go to sex and gender education, which could only be re-education. And I would have to moderate the content so not to offend men who claim to be women. And I was like, there's absolutely no way am I agreeing to any of this. It completely defeats the purpose of it, of having a female-only platform. It's supposed to be a place where women can actually speak freely. And here is this man not only wanting to be on the platform, but to actually control it, which I think is, as we sort of see time and time again, pretty typical behavior. And so I said no to conciliation. I was 15 weeks pregnant when I got the complaint. And by this point, I was in like end of second, early third trimester. It was stressful. To be frank, I did not want to go and sit in a room with him. I have no interest. I've never met this person. I have no interest in meeting this person. As time has gone on, I'm actually scared of him. So I also felt that the Australian Human Rights Commission were against me. And they were not taking into consideration my human rights, and by extension, the human rights of all women. And also actually men as well, anyone who does not believe in gender identity ideology. So I said no. And then, so basically if it's not resolved in the Australian Human Rights Commission, they advise the applicant that if they want, they can take it to federal court. They can file in federal court. They have 60 days to do it. He did it on the 60th day. Yeah, so he filed in court. I got a barrister, solicitor, everything. We were getting ready to do our first response to it. And then he withdrew. And I was like, is this a win? Like, did we just sort of stand our ground? I didn't really know, but I sort of took the win. We then actually, about 2 months later, we took the app offline, completely unrelated, but we basically had to do updates. And we'd spent all this time sort of treading water and just trying to, wait out all of this nonsense. And we'd learned a lot of what our core user base really wanted on the platform, for how to function and whatnot. And so obviously we're on a shoestring budget, so I can't do a big build to do like renovate an app like Elon can, for example. I don't have Elon's budget. So we were like, okay, we'll just take it off for a few months and then we'll relaunch, and hopefully, it will be a cleaner launch than it was last time when it was trans activists who, sort of found it and cancelled me straight out of the gate. But before we could relaunch it, Tickle refiled in federal court, and he refiled on that same claim, that initial one. So by this point, he was actually 260 days or thereabouts out of time. And so he had to get permission from the court for it to go ahead. So the hearing for that was in April of last year, and the judge allowed the case to go ahead, and he allowed it essentially because it's in the public interest. That was like one of the big reasons, which is correct. It is in the public interest. And my position very much is like, I want this issue to be resolved. So if I'd rather just have the fight now and resolve it rather than this continue on for any longer. So then in August of last year, the Australian Human Rights Commission intervened in the case as amicus curiae, which is friend of the court. It's quite a normal thing for like the Australian Human Rights Commission to do. They have a statutory right to do it. They intervene in lots of different cases. You can read their submissions into Tickle v Giggle. They're on the Australian Federal Court website if you just type in Tickle v Giggle, and they are worth reading because in their application to intervene, they actually admit that there is a conflict of sex versus gender, but then they proceed to just solve this with gender, and it's absurd because how can you solve the problem with the problem? But also when you read further down, when they go into their expertise on this issue, they list the other cases that they have intervened in, and they are trans in children cases. The Australian Human Rights Commission has intervened in court cases to get medicalisation to children. So I was reading it going, I can't believe that they've just put this in writing, and are boasting about it basically, but they are, and it's there. In their actual submission to the case, when they're basically interpreting the law, it is the craziest document I've ever read in my entire life. It's like 28 pages of human beings can change sex. Sex is not binary. It's not exclusive to male and female. If a man, or if a trans woman, but I would just say man, if a man desires to be pregnant, that is sufficient for him to be considered a woman in law. They can't wrap their head around why I claim that trans men are welcome on the platform. Because on the basis of sex, they're female. Like they can't work out why I would allow that. They're utterly captured. It's a moronic document. I've said this so many times this week. It is literally like a really unbelievable draft of 1984 that even Orwell went, there's absolutely no way anyone would believe this, but the Australian Human Rights Commission has picked it up and gone, we'll give it the old college try and implement it. It's just absolute nonsense. Now, why there is this situation and sort of this muddled mess is because in 2013, Australia's first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, under her government, they did amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act, where they removed the definition of sex, removed the definition of man and the definition of woman, and then they put in gender identity, and they actually did give it a definition, but it's basically gender identity is gender identity. It's something about mannerisms. It's nonsense. It means it's absolutely meaningless. But by taking out the definition of sex and putting in gender identity, and then what the Australian Human Rights Commission is sort of doing by saying that sex can be changed and it's not exclusive to male or female, they are basically trying to create and push this concept of legal sex, which legal sex, Kathleen Stock has actually written a lot about legal sex and she's brilliant on it. Legal sex is nonsense because either it's based on biological sex or why are you even using the word? It's not like it's utter nonsense. But legal sex is basically the next step of gender identity. And so in Australia, the people who change their identification documents, they are changing their birth certificates. So the applicant in this case has a birth certificate that says that he is female. And that would be then legal sex. Which it's always been a big question to me if I'm like, well, okay, well then if they think he's female and they think legal sex is something, then why is this case not sex discrimination? You know, it's just the thing where just absolutely nothing ever makes sense. It's all completely illogical. Because what I actually in this case admit to is sex discrimination, but under the normal Sex Discrimination Act, that's lawful sex discrimination because you can have a female-only platform. In fact, the Sex Discrimination Act itself was the exemption that allowed female-only spaces to exist, and it's why we'd have female-only gyms in Australia, or you'd have lesbian-only events, whatnot. And then now, as you know, as just moving into the future, there'll be more and more female-only things online. So this was completely lawful and normal, and no one knew that these amendments had happened. Like it's not like they were publicized. It was not like an event like when gay marriage became legal or anything. They were really done in stealth. And in Australia, not knowing a law, the status of a law is not actually a defense. My argument against that is that at no point would it have been a rational thought for me to go, oh gosh, should I just go and check if men are considered women in law? You wouldn't do it. Like you don't think that men would ever be considered women in law. I knew what the law used to be and it's what it should still be. So part of our defense is a constitutional challenge, and that's basically a challenge to the 2013 amendments completely. Because there's a very, very good argument that they should not be there. Like I would just say actually like a stone tight argument that they should not be there. In Australia, for how laws can be changed, if it's not sort of done through voting or something, it's like the external affairs power, and I think it's the heads of power. Anyway, it's all these different things, and the laws have to stay with like the treaties and the conventions within international law, that they are governed by, basically. So Australia's Sex Discrimination Act is governed by CEDAW, which is the Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and Girls, whatever it actually is. But it was the 1979 convention that has been signed by 189 countries in the world. The only countries that haven't signed it are the ones you'd expect to not sign it. Everyone else has. Most of them have ratified it. It's ratified in UK law, Canada. It's not ratified in the US, I don't think, but they are signatory to it. So CEDAW is a document about biological reality. Like, it is actually even a document against to protect women from bad sex-based stereotypes. So there's an argument even to be made that's this is sort of separate to the legal argument, but that just CEDAW, it's just in how it is, should it actually be the thing protecting women's rights from gender identity ideology. But because the activists have essentially lied about it and just basically just claimed that it includes what they would call trans women, but it just simply doesn't. It's just a lie. There's been so many times through this where, like, my legal team have been explaining something to me, and I don't know, I'll just be like, so they just lied? And they're like, yeah. Like, what do you mean they just lied? Like, how does this even happen? Like, how do you get away with this? I don't understand it. So they cite the Yogyakarta principles a lot, which was there was basically this conference in a few years ago on the rights of sort of sexual orientation and gender identity, which they're in conflict. But this document, the Yogyakarta principles, have not been ratified. It's been rejected by the UN. They've just tried to do all these things around the edges of CEDAW to try and be like, oh, look, it includes gender identity, it thinks men are women, but it just simply does not. And what makes Australia quite unique is that both Australia and New Zealand, incorporated CEDAW into our Sex Discrimination Acts very thoroughly. So other countries like ratified it and it's incorporated or put into legislation in some various ways, but we basically went all in. So Australia is in a very strong position to defend CEDAW. So with our constitutional challenge, with that, basically what would happen is, if we were to win it, hopefully, gender identity would be taken out of the Sex Discrimination Act. It would be established that sex is biological sex because it has to, so that it's not in breach of CEDAW. And then the ramifications of that around the world is it is establishing that it has been tested in court and found that CEDAW is for biological females. Like, this is an established legal precedent now that will be relevant in every other country that has ratified CEDAW. So it would mean that, say, especially like in places like Canada, where they really are struggling to get stuff going with this, they would be able to cite it. So in terms of like the gender identity discrimination charge, it's I didn't know this person. I don't remember even removing him. Men tried to get on all the time. I mean, I'm sure you understand, even with doing this, like how often men will sometimes try and crash something that is for women. Sometimes it would be thousands of men a day trying to get on Giggle. And so every now and then, like one or two would get through, of course. Like, nothing, there's no technology in this planet that is perfect. But the good old fashioned human eye does a really good job of it. And we would just be monitoring it all the time. And as soon as I saw Tickle, I just saw a man, and I just knew instantly that's a man, like, as you do, as we all do when we see a human being, we know instantly whether they're male or female. And it would have been me that removed him. I don't remember it at all. It's a complete non-event. I'd removed so many men, and the thousands upon thousands that had just tried to get on. And he He called and texted my phone after I'd removed him. When he became sort of a person in my life that I sort of stopped and took notice of him for a second. I didn't research him at anything at this point, actually, though, but the name Roxy Tickle became relevant to me. It's kind of a name you don't forget. He called and texted my phone to say that he was wanting to go onto the app. And that's because with Giggle, the only anchor for the user to the app was the only data basically that we had was a phone number, because you have to have an anchor to keep it, to basically make the app function for a user. So I was able to just type in that phone number into the server, and I just saw the picture of a man, and I was like, that's a man. So I didn't respond. I blocked his phone number. He claims that was him being reasonable to, get on the platform. But I'm like, no, you scared me, and you know exactly what this platform is. Like, throughout the Human Rights Commission complaint, I actually went back and researched and was like, I typed into Twitter. I was like, do I know who is this person? And I found that I'd had one interaction with him just before he went on the app. I had done a post about how TRAs are constantly leaving 1-star reviews and calling the app transphobic. And this is what happens when you're running something for women, that these men are constantly attacking it. And he had commented, and it was just this account from my perspective at that time saying, like, I'm a trans woman, and, I think that we should be on women's spaces, or something to that effect. And I was like, I was polite. I was like, I wish you well, but no, it's for females. So he knew exactly what the platform was. He knew exactly what my stance was. I also then blocked him, again, not knowing who it was, but I block trans activists every day. I mean, I've blocked like 15 today. Because I do. It's just how I try and cultivate my online experience. I don't want to hear their nonsense. But he did a tweet saying Sall Grover of Giggle has blocked me. So I even know when I blocked him, because he put it into words, and then he went on the app. So he very much knew what the app was, what my position on it was, and what would happen if I was to find him. And so I feel like the calling and texting my phone, I feel like it was just this like begging for attention or something. Then I got the Australian Human Rights Commission complaint on January 20th, 2022. And again, when we were doing research for everything, on January 24th, he was claiming to other trans activists that Giggle had been hacked and he was back on the app, and it was very affirming. I mean, he's just saying utter lies about, my platform for women, which is just completely, it fits into what trans activists have done since they discovered it in February 2020. So, while they've done everything that they can basically to try and destroy a female-only space, I'm just like, absolutely no way. I will fight to the end with this. So if we lose in federal court, we'll appeal it to the High Court. In Australia, the High Court is only an appeals court, and it is an error in law court. So basically what happens is, so we would be applying, saying an error in law has occurred because biological sex has been given no weight in the Sex Discrimination Act, which is a very strong argument to go to an error in law court. If we win in federal court and the other side applies to appeal it, they would be doing that on the basis that the error in law is that biological sex has been given weight in the Sex Discrimination Act. So it's utterly bizarre, but there we are. I mean, I say it all the time, I just find it crazy that we're supposed to accept that in the Sex Discrimination Act, the words discrimination and act have concrete definitions, but sex does not. But this is the crazy world we're in. So basically, I'm here in the UK because in Australia, there's such extreme censorship on this issue. Like, as I said at the beginning, the judge allowed this case to go ahead because it's in the public interest. When you go onto the site, the federal court site, why the AHRC documents are publicly available is because of the amount of interest in the case. It says it there in black and white. Not a single journalist in Australia will respond to me. I have spent a year contacting media, not one. Like, it's not even like, oh, some have. Literally not one has responded to me. They will not do anything give any publicity to this case. And even, I mean, this is a country where every day they do articles about either how brilliant the trans community is or how oppressed they are. Even they are not going all in on Tickle or anything. Like, they are literally silent about this case. And my theory on that is that these amendments were brought in stealth, and someone's like, well, if we have to lose them, we'll lose them in stealth too. That's my theory. This is just my opinion. So basically, yeah, I was like, airplanes exist. So I got on a plane and came over to the lovely Turf Island, where everyone's been really, really welcoming. And I'll be on GB News tomorrow night if everyone wants to tune in to talk about it, because this case it's the equivalent of £250,000, but so 500,000 Australian dollars. We've raised half of it so far. And this is through just the sheer generosity of everyone on Twitter. It's just been like, I'm so overwhelmed and will be forever grateful for it. But we have the other half still to go. And it is expensive. This is just how much these things cost. I mean, constitutional challenges are expensive. But how I look at it is like, if someone said, you just have to pay $500,000 and you'll get your rights back, would we all do it? I'm like, yeah, we would. Like, it would be cheap in the long run compared to all of the other nonsense we've had to do. And I also, I actually don't think that there would have been a pro bono law firm in Australia that would have taken me on. And on top of that, my legal team are brilliant, and they're all women. And I think that it's really important that women are paid for their skills and their profession and their labor. I couldn't fight for women's rights without paying the women who are doing all the work. If we go to High Court, it'll be another $500,000. So that would be the next big stressful thing. So it's gigglecrowdfund.com is where everyone can read more information about the case. The hearing, it goes to court in 2.5 weeks. It's 9th to the 12th of April. We will have a verdict sometime later this year. It could be June, July, August. Then there'll be a little bit of time where it sees either if we're going to take it to federal court or if they do. But there's a chance by like about August this year, this could be completely resolved and they don't go to the High Court and we've won, or it's about another year. So we'll see.